Story, in fact, making news in Canada today. Our coverage of the region's state of emergency is not over, of course. We still have a lot more to come. Here's a look at our lineup tonight.
How people are coping with the cold.
OK, garde-là, sur mon OPP, constat Bonneville.
And why this may be the storm of the century.
And on the magazine.
911.
A crisis center in crisis.
Maybe they can help you.
Montreal's 911 operators deal with disaster. The eye of the storm.
The National from Montreal with Hannah Gardner and Peter Mansbridge.
Good evening from Montreal. Once again tonight, a city at the heart of a crisis in the cold. A crisis that has up to 3 million people anxiously wondering when will the freezing rain stop and when will the power start. As so many people feared, the emergency here has deepened. Hydro crews waged a losing battle last night, a battle against another wave of a punishing storm, and it's not over yet. Here's a look at the storm system that just won't let up. As you can see, it cuts a huge swath, bringing misery from Mississippi to the Maritimes. Right now, the most serious situation continues to be right here in Montreal and in the communities south of the city. Tonight, more than 1 million homes are in the dark, and Hydro-Quebec warns they could stay that way for another 4 or 5 days. A state of emergency is in effect. The military is pitching in. About 20 communities in eastern Ontario, including Ottawa, have also declared states of emergency, the first time that's happened in the history of the nation's capital. Nearby Kingston and Cornwall, Ontario, were also hard hit. 80% of Kingston's hydro customers had no electricity at some point today, and power to the entire city of Cornwall was knocked out. In West Quebec, an almost unprecedented scene. Rows of emergency trucks rushed in from the United States to help restore power. Bracing tonight for a lashing from the storm, Canada's maritime coast. Already, ice pellets and freezing rain are battering parts of New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. Many schools in the region have already shut down. The situation on the U.S. side of the border isn't much better. Freezing rain in Maine and Vermont left more than 200,000 people without power. Further south, it was rain. Too much rain that led to flooding in several states, including Tennessee and North Carolina. Here in Montreal, Hydro-Quebec tried to assure its customers today that it will win the power struggle. But making gains, restoring everyone's electricity will take time, and the big utility cannot do it alone. Once again, tracking the fallout from the ice storm, here's the CBC's Mark Kelly.
This storm has brought with it more than 3 days of freezing rain and not a moment of mercy. The situation in this battered region was already bad, but today it got worse. Ice pellets and high winds brought down more branches and more power lines.
We just saw a branch fall here about 2 minutes ago, and the branches are falling everywhere. It's just, you know, stay out from under the trees, because they're there. There we go. There we go.
More than 3,000 hydro workers tried to repair the damage, but clearly the storm had the upper hand. Every hour, another 100,000 hydro customers lost their electricity.
Yes, we have a tough job, but we think that we are able to win the battle.
But Hydro's tough talk fell as flat as these high-tension towers. In this region of Quebec, about 90% of the people were without power. Faced with a growing crisis, Hydro-Quebec asked for help from the Army. About 500 troops are being sent in to clear branches and set up shelters.
We're known for deploying overseas and helping out people who are, worlds away. But I think it's just as important to be able to help, Canadians at a time when they need our help.
And Prime Minister Jean Chrétien said another 3,500 troops are on standby if needed.
The armed forces are under alert, ready to move, and the planes are under alert, ready to move. And we respond to the requests of the provincial governments. We do not act for them.
After 2 days of 18-hour shifts, these weary hydro workers welcome the help.
Yes, oh yeah, we need it. Yeah, we need it. But yeah, of course, because as soon as we can put the power on, it's better for the people. That's why we need some help.
Help is also arriving from the United States. Hundreds of crews from power companies in New England were called in.
How you doing? Dave Sanders. Good.
Dave Sanders drove 14 hours from Vermont. He says in 32 years on the job, he's never seen anything like this.
It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. I've never seen it this bad. Really haven't.
You got the help.
Even retired hydro employees like Jean-Guy Duperré, who has no power himself, were brought back to work.
And everybody's got to help everybody now. You're in a situation that could even turn dangerous for a lot of people. So.
And the demand for help, the demand for everything, it seems, is mounting. Some motorists lined up for 2.5 hours to get gas from the few stations that were still open.
Picking up 2 of these and 5 of these.
Many store shelves were empty, emergency supplies picked clean. While restaurants like this one said they were running short of food. The only thing that can really bring relief to this region now is a break in the weather. And after 1 week of freezing rain, the forecasters are finally calling for one. The problem is it may not be until late tomorrow. That means another night and another day of drizzle, damage, and danger. Peter?
All right, Mark, hang in there for a minute. I'll be back to you in just a second. Tonight, at least 6 deaths are being blamed on the weather and power crisis. Dozens of people have also been sent to hospital overcome by carbon monoxide fumes. All the danger has officials working very hard to get the people most at risk to safety. Tom Kennedy now on finding shelter from the storm.
In its first hours, this storm was a familiar winter inconvenience. It's become a disaster. An elderly couple died last night, asphyxiated in a fire they started to try to keep warm. Elsewhere, people sent to hospital, poisoned by carbon monoxide, burning fossil fuels indoors again, trying to keep warm. There have been more than 100 cases like it. For 3 days, firefighters have seen the danger. He says simply, it's hell, pure hell. And after 3 days, more and more people are giving up and heading to shelters. It's the cold. It's also the danger of electrical fires. This family had enough after seeing sparks around their house all night. It was a night of horror, this man says. With no sign of the crisis ending, another worry now is the vulnerable, the elderly. One Montreal municipality has been sending volunteers door to door, looking for seniors, trying to convince them to go to shelters. It's not always easy.
Well, I'd rather stay home. It's a tough sell, and they don't want to leave, but it's too cold at this point for people in places in unheated homes.
So the shelters continue to fill. They're in schools, community centers, even at an aquatic center. In fact, pretty well any area that has heat and space qualifies. But even space is now running short.
We're putting a generator in one of our big chalets so that if we need more space, it'll be available, there'll be power.
And predictably, those hospitals that still have electricity or backup generators, they're filling up too.
As you can see, we have, over 60 stretchers, and where our capacity is 30 stretchers, so it's extremely busy here.
And a ward that had been closed for renovations is now reopened for people the hospital does not want to send home to the cold. People like Lisa Paperno.
It's a nice gesture, it shows that people have a heart in taking care of people.
Experience is a great teacher, and municipalities are learning quickly about crisis management.
Since Monday afternoon, we get approximately 200 and 250 calls per day.
We've got people with dialysis machines, we've got elderly citizens, we've got a lady 99 years old here.
But amidst it all, a glimmer of hope with every glimmer of light. A Montreal family, the Scarderas, just after the electricity came back.
Every time it's flickering, girls and boys says, "Mommy, no, don't let it go, don't let it go. It's out of my control. It's the weather,
But the cruel reality is that the number of people without power has doubled in the last 24 hours, and the shelters are not immune. Tonight, several hundred people are staying at this shelter in a Montreal suburb, but the lights went out here as well. Tom Kennedy, CBC News, Montreal.
Mark Kelly joins us again now. Mark, I want to get back to this issue of the reinforcements that arrived today, because you had the real sense that they've really arrived just in time.
That's very true, Peter. Quebec Premier Lucien Bouchard has called on the spirit of solidarity of Quebecers, and we've really seen a tremendous sense of community, of cooperation and resilience, but it is beginning to take its toll. After 3 days without power, people are tired, people are fed up. We can't forget the people as well at the eye of the storm here, the workers themselves. I spoke to one worker today who's been working an 18-hour shift. Afterwards, he's going home to a home without power and electricity that's cold. The spirit is still strong, but it's beginning to show some signs of cracks.
You know, we also saw today the first signs of starting to point the finger of blame, and you get this at times like this in these crises. It usually comes around day 3, like this one is, where people are starting to look for something beyond the weather to lay blame on.
Yeah, interestingly enough, today we saw that it was Hydro-Quebec's own union representing the employees that put out a communique criticizing Hydro-Quebec for the way it's managing the workforce throughout this crisis, and also suggesting that perhaps some of its equipment has not been properly maintained. Now, we don't know if that's true, but Premier Bouchard has promised there will be a post-mortem, a serious post-mortem, he said, once this storm dies down.
All right, Mark Kelly joining us once again tonight from the streets of Montreal. As we mentioned, the ice is causing tremendous difficulties in Ontario and the Maritimes. We'll have the latest on that when we come back. And later on the magazine with Hannah Gartner.
24 hours in a city without light. What to do when modern life shuts down? Such peace. For some, it's the adventure of a lifetime.
He's not finding much difference. He's kind of having fun.
For others, a recipe for disaster.
We find a ibashi. They use this from 6 o'clock to 11 tonight inside.
Living through a crisis. The long, dark night.
I have a recurring dream. A dream where Canada scores the overtime winner in Nagano in the greatest hockey game of the century. Then I wake up and I'm there.
On the Mass Blue road trip to the Olympic Winter Games, you could win tickets to see Canada play the U.S. in Nagano. Call this number now to register to win. Then
Field of expertise. Like Royal Bank's Nella Tadaro, who offers personalized one-on-one advice for your retirement plan, and help personalize one-on-one advice for your retirement plan, and the help of other team members when you need them.